Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sitting here Sunday morning, just got the rewatch in, and Dill, Penn State going on the road, playing USC, pulling it out. My biggest takeaway from this football game is that Penn State doesn't win this game in 2023. And one of the most underrated offseason hires that we saw was Coach Kolnicki coming over to this Penn State offense. I think he makes them a legitimate threat, not only in the Big Ten, but in the national championship picture. With how good I think Penn State can play defense when they are at their best, this Penn State offense, it looks different. It feels different. That's a massive storyline that not a lot of people are talking about in the landscape of college football. You're telling me Penn State got outrushed by USC and was able to go across the country on the road and win that football game. I think Drew has taken a massive step in the right direction. I want to get into what we saw from him. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Penn State fans, a lot of different takeaways that you can have from this football game, right? A lot of good, some things you want to clean up too, which we're going to get into. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's start with this. I'm going to go big picture on you. How dangerous is Penn State, not only in the landscape of the Big Ten, but the national championship picture in 2024?
Yeah, I wanted to get into that because everyone is obviously talking about Oregon, Ohio State, and that was a good game. Those two are really, really good teams. But I think Penn State is right there with those teams. You look, their defense is still really, really elite. Their defensive line, how disruptive they can be. I think they can be a problem for both those teams, frankly, up front. But I think at the end of the day, you have a guy in Drew Allar who you look at that fourth quarter alone. I mean, there were 2 4th and 10s back-to-back on that game, or game-tying drive, I should say. There's not a chance in the world that he makes those plays last year. Those are 2. One was just a tight window throw to Fleming. The other, he had to improvise, use his legs a little bit. If they get that version of Drew Allar, they obviously have some weapons led by Tyler Warren, who is an absolute monster. This team can be really, really good. I think.
As a Michigan guy, I'll continue to bang the table for Colson Loveland to be the best tight end in the country. It's getting harder and harder about Tyler Warren, dude, because that kid's special. Not only at the tight end position, but just as a general football player for Penn State. That dude is very, very fun to watch.
And that's where I want to get into what they're doing differently on offense, is they're really doing a good job of creatively getting the ball into their playmakers' hands. And not just in the way it felt like, again, I feel like I've said this a bunch of times, but last year it was kind of like, okay, just go win your one-on-one matchup. Go try to run a power play or a counter play. Just be better in Ohio State or Michigan. Now you're seeing them, okay, they know Tyler Warren's their guy. They're using him in the backfield. They're using him playing center. They're just getting him the ball in a ton of creative ways, whether that's making plays after the catch with his running ability or getting him involved making plays in contested catches.
At a certain point, you have to dial things up. And Penn State just never dialed anything up in 2023. They're dialing it up in 2024. What stands out to me, and I want to circle back to Drew because I have some takes on what I saw from him against USC. Dill, what stands out to me about this Penn State offense is how quickly they've been able to adopt what Coach Kolnicki wants to do. Like, it's a lot of different personnel. It's a lot of different formations. I was kind of concerned of like, all right, how quick can Penn State transition and grasp what Coach K wants to do on offense? You don't see illegal substitutions. You don't see guys lining up wrong and taking penalties. They know what they're doing with a Penn State offense that it's a hell of a lot more complicated than what we saw in 2023 in their overall grasp and how well they can execute these kind of wild kitchen sink looks. That stuff matters. And again, when you can execute those plays at the highest level in big moments, you're going to win a lot of football games. And that's kind of what I see from Penn State so far in 2024. Coach Kolnicki, man, I told you in the offseason, like when I was in a bad mood last year, I just go watch some Kansas offense film and just feel better. Like, it's so fun watching this guy.
He has a better sense of how to attack teams and where they're weak. I mean, USC likes to play a fair amount of that zone where they drop their corners. They have their safeties playing up in the flats. He was constantly attacking that portion in between the flat and in between where the corners are playing and getting Tyler Warren into those areas. And they were killing USC with that. It's just like his ability to identify what defense they're doing and use his best players to attack those weaknesses get play after play after play. And USC could never stop it. And that's a good USC defensive coaching staff. Like Danton Lynn is probably one of the better coaches in the country, I think, of the defensive coordinator.
I think that was a massive story, was like the chess match that you went on. And what we talk about with good offensive coordinators, like not only can you game plan, not only can you install a good offense, but what are you doing in the 4 quarters? Like, what are you seeing? How are the adjustments you're making? Like, they made some really big time adjustments in that second half, and you're seeing that consistently from Coach Koldnicki. Now, real quick, before we move on to the Penn State defense, which I have some takes on that as well, I want to dive into Drew a little bit more. The 3 interceptions, that might stand out to a lot of Penn State fans. One, obviously, was on the Hail Mary. It doesn't count. Really, 2 interceptions. Dill, I'm okay with it. Like, I think a lot of people emphasize the touchdown to interception ratio for Drew last year, saying, hey, he takes care of the football. Yeah, he does, but he never really tried to make any big time throws last year. He was very conservative. And when you're trying to win at the highest level, you can't have a quarterback that's being conservative. I'm okay with him throwing a little bit more interceptions in the 2024 season if he's making those high level throws that we continue to see him make. Now, yeah, I don't want him throwing 3 interceptions in a football game. That's too many. You're not going to win a ton when you turn the ball over that much. But one of the biggest changes I've seen from Drew is, hey, I'm going to make some big time throws. I'm going to fit the football into some small windows. Yeah, it's a little bit more risky. I might throw some more interceptions than I did in 2023, but it's going to be better for this overall offense, and that's what you're seeing. Again, I'm not concerned about the interceptions because you're seeing Drew grow in confidence, and he's making some – I thought the wide receivers could have came up with some more plays as well. We could probably talk about that.
First half, honestly, they played really well, I thought, for the most part in the second half. Maybe a couple like ones you probably want back. But the first half, they were not playing great. I think that very much contributed to that lack of success Penn State had in the first half. But when they got it going, they certainly got it going. And one last thing on the interception talk and like how aggressive Penn State maybe should be, I think you got to play to your personnel, and you know your defense is good. That defense came in and bailed them out on both those interceptions.
Yes.
They were able to make red zone stands, hold them to a field goal. When you have the defense that plays the way Penn State plays, I think you can afford to be far more aggressive than what Penn State was last year. Like, they just wanted to drag teams into the sewer, not score any points, and see how few points they could give up. I don't think when you have that talented of quarterback, that's kind of the answer. Like, go let him try to score and trust your defense. If he does throw an interception and they turn the ball over, trust them to go bail it out. I think that is a better recipe if they want to go compete with teams like Oregon, Ohio State, those big dogs that have kind of given them the problems in the past.
Yeah, you brought Drew in to be a difference maker at quarterback. Like last year, the numbers were okay on paper. He loved the touchdown interception ratio, but I wouldn't say he was a difference maker in 2023. Saturday afternoon against USC, the dude was a difference maker. Again, this team ran for 118 yards and put up 33 points. You love that. If you're a Penn State fan, you have a quarterback. I think that he's continuing to get better, which is exciting. But more importantly, he's a quarterback that can go out and win you some football games. Last thing I'll say on the offense, Dale, this offensive line's so freaking good, man. Danton Lynn was really creative, brought pressure on 56% of Drew's dropbacks. They only gave up, he brought blitzes, I should say. They only gave up pressure on 13. Like, they picked up a lot of exotic looks from that USC defense. They were nails of pass protection. I think that's another massive storyline for Penn State. Now, moving on to the defensive side of the football, on paper, you could be critical. It wasn't a great performance from Penn State's defense, right? They gave up 30 points. They gave up over 400 total yards. That being said, I know the USC fans are pissed at Lincoln Riley right now. Coach Lincoln Riley was in his absolute bag in the first half. I mean, the plays that he was dialing up, it seemed like every single play worked. But most importantly, they were using Penn State's aggression against them a little bit, right? You know this Penn State defense, they want to create negative plays. They want to get after the quarterback. Lincoln Riley knew that. It was all over the film. We kind of knew that's Penn State, and they ain't going to change for anybody. They don't care who they're playing. They're going to play that brand of defense. Lincoln Riley with some end arounds, with some delays, with some screens, kind of using that aggression against Penn State. They did a very good job of that in the first half. Penn State makes some adjustments. They were kind of nails in the second. And my biggest storyline here is this Penn State front seven makes you fundamentally change how you want to play offense. Like Lincoln Riley, they were going to seven-man pass protections pretty consistently, leaving tight ends and running backs to chip because they knew they couldn't block these edge rushers. When you have a front seven that, although they didn't light it up, 1 sack, 6 TFLs, that's not crazy numbers for what we normally expect from Penn State. you're making USC completely change how they want to operate on offense because of how good that pass rush is. You're going to see a lot of teams have to do that when they play Penn State's defense throughout the rest of 2024.
Yeah, and I think like down to down, they were pretty dominant. You look,
Oh, yeah.
only 16 first downs in the whole game, 2 of 11 on third down, like those type of things. I think, like, yeah, they gave up a couple explosive plays that you certainly don't want to give up. USC, they've done a good job of drawing those things up. Lincoln Riley historically has been a good coach in terms of making those things happen. But aside from a couple of those plays, that still looked like kind of the Penn State defense where they were really, really aggressive. They were making it really hard for quarterbacks to make anything happen with any consistency. And that's kind of what you got. Again, you don't want to give up those big plays. I'm sure that's something Penn State probably is going to need to fix when they go play a team like Oregon, if they do end up playing a team like that, who is really, really explosive. Same thing with Ohio State, who is another team who can play with that type of explosiveness. But honestly, down to down, it's still like that Penn State defense. They're still really dominant.
When you play the best teams in the country, it's going to be hard to win football games when you give up those kind of explosive plays. If you're Penn State, you're happy to come out with a win and also get some film in terms of, hey, this is what one of the best offensive play callers in the country dialed up against us. A lot of it worked. Let's go get into the film room going into a bye week to kind of fix some of those things we saw. I think it's a really good opportunity.
Again, I think you want to know, like, their first-year defensive coordinator too. I know it's probably a little bit of an extension, and I'm sure some of what Manny was doing was kept in place, but it's still Tom Allen's defense. He's coming in, so I even expect this defense to continue to get better and better and better because I look at the talent. It's still obviously there. I mean, that defensive line, I'd probably put best in the country. How dominant those two defensive ends are such a problem for almost anyone. Abdul Carter, I mean, he's going to be in the conversation for a top 5 pick for sure. So 100%. It's like they're loaded there. I think the secondary is playing really well too. You got guys stepping up. Who I thought played a really, really nice game was Elliott Washington, a guy who I didn't necessarily expect to see a ton from this year, but he had a really nice game today. And like those type of things where you have your depth in that secondary, that was always going to be the question, looking like they're just going to be fine there. I think they answered some of those today.
You took away 2 really good boundary receivers. Like Deuce Robinson, Jacoby Lane, I think are some of the better wide receivers that you're going to see all 2024. I wouldn't say they were non-factors, but they weren't huge factors in this football game. And those, again, that's some of the better wide receivers that you're going to see. That's another really big positive. And look, you're going to have to play some of these games where at times it was sloppy for Penn State. You are going into the half down 3 or down 2 scores. You're able to battle back. Drew wins you the football game. I think there are, things to clean up, but a lot of really positive takeaways for Penn State as well. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.